On this week's episode of the Father Dynasty Podcast, Jake joins me for a Roast Me or Toast Me Best Ball edition, camp news and the stamps of approval, and running backs in Dynasty. So, without further ado, What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of the Father Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk fatherhood, fantasy football, and everything in between. And with me today is a very special guest, future NFL executive, and my other roommate at the FF Expo. Check him out on Twitter at Jacob_Ridgeway. Jake, how are we doing?
Doing wonderful, True. It's a pleasure to be back. The pleasure is all mine, and I can't help but admire the Northside High School soccer. Look at that. 07,
baby.
That wasn't even your senior year.
Nope.
Dude, that's vintage, buddy.
Haven't grown since. Well, the belly has, but thankfully they took the seam out a little bit for me.
Sure. I hear that. That's a strong hoodie, pal. Respect for you to be able to not only pull it off, but that it still fits.
Hey, it's funny at this point when I run out of clothes, it's because I have worn them multiple thousands of times since my high school. I think I've outgrown the middle school stuff. The high school stuff still has a special place in my closet, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Jake, I know before we dive into the roast me or toast me, a segment that I think you thrive in, if you will. I know we were talking about this in our group text earlier with all the chaos and news. Mostly today, we got Zach Moss breaking his arm, Tim Patrick, another lost season, tearing his Achilles, KJ Hamler getting waived with a heart issue, but I think he might be coming back to the Broncos in some way. Ronald Jones, a different bit of injury, as in getting juiced to the gills and getting suspended for 2 games. So what, either of those or maybe something else that you saw, what was maybe, the most notable thing or just a takeaway that you had from one of those incidents there?
Yeah, I appreciate the update on the news and notes. I think the Broncos wide receiver room is first and foremost that hits home for fantasy footballers. You look at, second round pick who's entering in year 4 of his contract, obviously the end of his contract because he was a second round pick in KJ Hamler. And you had Tim Patrick who signed a 3-year deal what would it be, 2 years ago now, and has torn a second ACL in back-to-back seasons. And I think he's on the cusp of turning 30 this fall. So, you go from a very robust wide receiver room there and, inclusive of Albert O and Greg Dulcich in the tight end room with Russell Wilson and obviously the new coach and Sean Payton. You had to feel pretty good about what the collective receiving crew there. And now I think there are some question marks given, the recent injuries and heart challenges with KJ Hamler. Your heart breaks for KJ Hamler. A young player with a lot of promise out of Penn State. He was a second-round pick for a reason. And, really for whatever reason, the breaks didn't go his way the past couple of years. And you just hope that maybe he's able – because he's only 23 years old. I think maybe 24 this fall. So that's really young. So if he were to take a year off and come back, he could still have a 5 or 6 year career in the NFL as a slot receiver. And Tim Patrick, he's one of the emotional leaders of the Broncos. So it's not just the on-field presence that you lose there. And certainly heart breaks for him. But, on the return side, fantasy football is still going to go on. And I think you have to look at somebody like Marvin Mims and say, hey, the opportunity is on the table here.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, with the Broncos. More specifically, it's those 2 guys that have already had issues in the past. I mean, KJ Hamler's was a mixed bag of injury here, injury there, not necessarily just stuck with a bunch of season-ending injuries. And then Tim Patrick was one of the 2 guys, he and Cortland Sutton, I think either in the same season or pretty close, both getting extended at a certain time. Patrick getting a decent amount of money, if I do remember correctly, for what his production was at the time. And yeah, him being that much older, there was one injury I don't remember, then there was an ACL, now there's an Achilles. Like, at his age, at that position, I know he's a bigger guy, not necessarily a burner. I'm really hoping he comes back. I'm hoping that, again, yeah, it does seem like he's a good leader for the locker room. So at a minimum, he can come back and provide that leadership. But yeah, for all those people that were championing Marvin Mims even before these injuries and everything happened, I mean, he's got the runway ready for him. And, I'm sure Sean Payton will maybe get the corpse of some wide receiver he remembered back from New Orleans that no one's ever that no one is front of mind on. But to be honest, if you think about it, it's Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Marvin Mims, and like you said, you got the Alberto and Greg Dulcich, and mentioning Saints, I'm pretty sure he brought over Adam Troutman in a nice low key trade. So there's some weapons there. You got to hope Russell Wilson's going to turn it around, but I am optimistic, let's just say, for the Broncos season compared to what last year was. So
yep, it's Eminem season in Denver. And one quick nugget. So I did see today that between Hamler, Sutton, Jeudy, and Tim Patrick, those 4 wide receivers had played in 2 games with each other over the last 3 seasons. So just wasn't meant to be.
Absolutely not. Hey, who knows? Maybe it means a nice little reset, and who knows what this year will bring in the offseason after this in terms of more free agency, more drafts, that sort of thing. So looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to this roast me or toast me. And do a little roast me or toast me.
I roasted you to your face. I may have just roasted you behind your back.
So a roast me or toast me, this is a best ball edition, and on here, this is the best way I could format it. So these are 2 best ball rosters. Tyler and I were both in a best ball draft, and I picked from the 5th position. Tyler picked from the 4th. Tyler, of course, naming himself Justice Beaver.
Yep.
The pretty standard scoring options: 4 points passing touchdown, 6 for rushing and receiving touchdown, and then that's the layout for the lineup for 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, and then 1 flex. So however you want to break this down, however want to give a grade or your sense on the construction of these rosters for best ball.
Sure, and I think you can help me educate me on this too. So is best ball, are you drafting via snake draft, or is this a salary cap?
So it is still snake, and so it's snake, no like reversal or any of that kind of fun stuff. So
okay. Got it. Okay. So no Scott Fish-esque type draft here.
Yep.
Okay. Helpful. I wish I almost had like team 1 and team 2 here. I didn't know who was who. So I could be unbiased. No, I'm kidding.
Man.
I'm kidding.
Sure.
So I will tell you with Father Dynasty, I feel like my personal thought process, I'm not a personal proponent of best ball. I think it takes away the spirit of the law of fantasy football. But I can see why you'd have interest in it. And I think for me, Father Dynasty's team, I can, just tell linearly, okay, who were the top picks? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, you go from, I'm sure your top picks were Hurts, Cooper Kupp, Breece Hall, Dallas Goedert's going to be relatively high, Terry McLaurin as well, Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers. This is a really strong roster top to bottom. And I think that you've allowed yourself a couple of home run hits. Evan Ingram's a bit of a home run hit. He had sort of a flash in the pan year last year. Great year with Trevor Lawrence. Best year since his rookie year with the Giants. And of course, you have to mention Rashad Penny and Tyler Algier, and Zeke Elliott, Cordero Patterson. These are guys that either are or could be strong number 2s should there be an injury. And if it's best ball, sign me up for as many of those guys as I can on my roster, because you're just looking for boom or bust potential. So I think you're looking for people like Kadarius Toney. That's another great example to me of somebody who's got the boom or bust potential. And I think you have several of those on your roster, including Rashid Shaheed and Wan'Dale Robinson. Quez Watkins, obviously, he could have 3 catches and 2 touchdowns for 150 yards. He did that a couple of times last year. I mean, it's literally boom or bust, and I think that's what you're going for. In terms of Justice Beaver, I felt like this team was steady Eddie. Not much of a believer in Davante Adams with Jimmy G at the helm. I think Davante Adams is a pristine route runner, and Jimmy G, I think, is more of a 10 yards and in type thrower. And I think I appreciate he's going for big swings like Mike Williams. Irv Smith is another with a new quarterback in Joe Burrow. Granted, he's probably the fourth target there, maybe 5th behind Mixon. And then you have big swings with Khalil Herbert at the running back position. And obviously Khalil has the best chance of just about any running back in the league to break something wide open. And I think that's really what you're looking for. Again, I think his roster is more steady Eddie with Purdy and James Cook, Charbonnet, Jordan Addison, Zay Jones. These are guys that don't necessarily have that boom or bust potential, but then again, Justice Beaver could argue, hey, I've got Rondale Moore and the likes of Mecole Hardman as well, who could have, those make or break weeks, which I think is also strong. And, I know I didn't mention Tyreek Hill, but that's more because I personally just don't care for Tyreek Hill in the fantasy space. But in these cases, I think anytime you could get him on a best ball roster, you're doing pretty well. But if I had to make a pick, I think I would lean Father Dynasty here.
I'd love to hear it. Yeah, I think it was before last season was my first, I guess, diving into the best ball waters. And initially, with redraft leagues and, you have redraft leagues where you get to, the full gamut of picking a roster. And, of course, in dynasty leagues, once you're already in it, you're really only looking at the rookie drafts. So getting a chance to just have a new format, and I kind of treated it more when I first had done it as, hey, this is basically like a mock draft for redraft, but there's more stakes on it. So, I mean, a lot of these leagues, it's, $3 or something like that, and it's best ball, of course, so it's hands off. You draft it once, you don't look at it again until the end of the season, but something where it's more like, you could have people that just, log on, and I'm sure just $3, don't even look at it, just let it auto draft and just hope for the best, and with the variance there. But something exciting to do every now and again, and this is, something I'll do for, I don't do it quite as often as I used to, but for every Father Dynasty birthday, I like to have a little best ball bonanza and have a little best ball draft there. So happy to do it, and definitely looking forward to probably the next Roast Me or Toast Me, hopefully being a real trade that has been done in one of the leagues, as I know the well's been a little bit dry. Tyler and I did do a recent wide receiver swap. Pretty low key. I don't know if anybody won or lost. It's just kind of older guy, younger guy. We'll see what happens. So, well, Jake, I appreciate the roast, and I'm sure Tyler appreciates the toast. Or excuse me, I said that backwards. But Jake, are you ready for camp stamp?
Let's do it. Let's stamp the camp.
Need to get the perfect stamp.
That's a fantasy.
This is a stamp.
Anyway, how's camp?
Camping?
Yeah.
You can't triple stamp a double stamp.
Incredible transition, Chew.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Shout out to Video Bolt, and shout out to me splicing together a bunch of good movie quotes, ending, of course, with Dumb and Dumber, saying you can't triple stamp a double stamp. So first up here, so the general idea is I picked each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and plenty of camp news going around. I could have picked from any number of different things. This is not picking, do you like this player over the other? This is more so with the quote associated with each player, which one are you kind of giving the stamp of approval that you're maybe more buying into and believing is maybe not just complete nonsense. And before you say it, Jake, I would argue all of this is probably nonsense, but we'll see what we can do here. So with the first two guys, we got Brock Purdy and Sam Howell, my guys. Brock Purdy, we had a quote here. So Brock Purdy has been cleared to play without any restrictions, and since I had done the notes, of course, he's practiced a number of days, and that was from John Lynch saying that. And for Sam Howell, this is a quote that he had said, "At this point, I have total command of the offense." So, Jake, thoughts on who would you give your camp stamp of approval to on this one?
Yeah, this is actually really difficult. I think I've done a 180 on both of these players in the last, I'd say, month and a half or so. By the way, I'm not worthy of these transitions. They're that well done. But I think if I had to pick one, it's Brock Purdy, and it's more so not about the player, but the team and opportunity he has because of all the weapons in San Francisco. Well, I think Elijah Mitchell could start at 15, 16 clubs in the league at running back, and he's behind Christian McCaffrey, who's arguably the best running back on any given Sunday. Great movie, by the way. At any point in time. So, obviously not to mention Debo and et cetera on down the line, Ayuk and Kittle, et cetera. But Sam Howell, I think, so I would pick Purdy, but I think you could make the case for Sam Howell. And I think I stood next to him one time at a dinner, and I mean, I'm 5'9", and Sam Howell I felt like was maybe 2.5 inches taller than me. he's kind of a broad guy. So respect him for that. But I just felt like, wow, how is this guy going to see over an NFL offensive line when he's probably 6 feet in shoes? But I'm a believer in him. I think that he has the ability to move around in the pocket. That seems to be that's the trend the NFL is going. I think he's a very confident player. I think he was obviously very successful in making people like De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome look really good in college, and there's something to be said for that. Not to mention Josh Downs, who's now with the Colts. So I think that he creates opportunity for players to play above their pay grade, if you will. And I'm anxious to see what he brings to the table. He was great against Dallas to end the year last year. I'm not sure exactly what Dallas was thinking in terms of like where their head was, because they were a playoff team at that point. But I'm anxious to see him play more so than Purdy. But I think if I had to pick one or two that I wanted to be my starter, I would say Purdy because of the offensive system, not necessarily the player. But I do think Howell's got a chance to be successful.
Yeah, it very much seems like, when you look in the San Francisco system, the thought is, all right, can you get the ball out quick? Good decision-making. At times you will be asked to make the play, make the throw, but more broadly, we want you to work within the system and just not dink and dunk necessarily, but, work within the shorter to intermediate routes and let the yak monsters that they've assembled in San Fran do their best. And, yeah, with Sam Howell, certainly if you were, say, to transplant Brock Purdy over to Washington, I don't know that he'd necessarily have the same success. Certainly the weapons are vastly different, but, Washington does have some good weapons, but also Sam Howell, in my opinion, I think he's the more complete modern-day quarterback in terms of, he's a bit more bruising. I know that was more so in college, but I do think he has, a better frame to him, a good arm.
Good point.
And they both kind of tout a good kind of sense of leadership, I think, in much different ways. I think, Brock Purdy may be a bit more reserved, but I think I've heard stuff from teammates last year as they were talking about him basically just being thrust into the starting position after being Mr. Irrelevant. And they were just talking about how tremendously confident he is. He's humble but confident at the same time, which is great. But Sam Howell, of course, has if he's saying he has a command of the offense, I think he has a good sense of confidence about himself as well.
Sure.
So, yeah, and we'll see how these two guys shake out by season's end. But for running backs, and it was funny I was going to make Deuce Vaughn tremendously smaller than Javonte Williams, but I tried to make him somewhat comparable on here. So the running backs I have, like I just said, Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos and Deuce Vaughn of the Dallas Cowboys. And the quotes I've got here are for Javonte Williams on if he'll run with violent intentions when he's on the field. He said, "That's the plan." And for Deuce Vaughn, and this is a lengthy one here, this is from Schottenheimer, the OC for Dallas. He's truly hard for the defense to see when he's back there, when he's back there behind the offensive line. You see the defensive lineman there engaged like, I can't see him. Where did he go? And then when you get him out in space, he's a matchup problem. Yep. So what are your thoughts on these two arguably very different backs?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one thing I wanted to mention about Brock Purdy going back to is that the fact that he's been given a clean bill of health on July 30th, 31st, that's pretty impressive from where we were, call it 6 months ago. So I think it's pretty cool to see all systems go. And I mean, it sounds like, we don't have to worry about the Sam Darnold show or the Trey Lance show. It sounds like it's going to be the Brock Purdy show, and I'm excited to see it. So back to Javonte and Deuce. So it's really hard not to get on the Deuces on the loose train, right?
Yep.
And Kansas State just has players you can root for. Darren Sproles, obviously, who Deuce is compared to. Somebody like Tyler Lockett also comes to mind. Terrence Newman, though he was a Cowboy for a long time, great person, great player. I have to go with Javonte Williams. I think with Deuce just gives me Jarrett Patterson vibes. From Buffalo, and that scares me just a little bit. And Deuce obviously is not going to have the ability to play special teams given his size. I know he's not. You can't see him behind the offensive line, and maybe there is room for him. But what's going to happen when he gets hit by a 240-pound linebacker that's 6'3"? I think that things could change, and maybe that. Deuce is a hoss, and he was awesome to watch in college. I just have reservations about what his size can bring to the NFL, which is obviously that's not rocket science. That's why he was picked in the 5th or 6th round. In terms of Javonte, I mean, all reports seem very strong in terms of his ability for week 1. And, until I hear something to the contrary, I'm going to continue to believe that he's ready, willing, and available. And the ACL plus, the rest of the tendons are going to be in playing shape. I think, we have reservations because of players like J.K. Dobbins that showed so much promise and then tears an ACL, and the following year is up and down and on the injured list, and then comes back, plays really well, but then needs to sit out a couple of games because he's still not 100%. That scares the daylights out of fantasy managers, and especially with somebody like Javonte Williams, who has a lot of talent and who was a valedictorian, by the way, out of high school. It's hard not to root for him in his talent and his ability, especially when you don't have an oaf like Melvin Gordon standing in your way, who's just literally fumbling and bumbling around the offensive line, and he's not really gaining any momentum. So I think I would pick Javonte, and I'm really rooting for and hoping for a clean bill of health. And until I hear otherwise, I'm full steam ahead on him in upcoming redraft leagues.
Yeah, Javonte, I guess much like we were talking about Brock Purdy and the thought of Javonte Williams, I think it was maybe more expected initially that he would be back for the beginning of the season, but the assumption is we'd be kind of ramping up and not, full steam for a couple of weeks there. And, seemingly thus far, he's good to go. Apparently the knee's okay. I still assume there could be a bit of rust to shake off through week 1 and week 2, week 3, but I think it's, it's his backfield. And I think when they brought in Samaje Perine, I think that was a tremendous addition. 1, it was not tremendously expensive, but 2, it's Samaje Perine to do it all back, a veteran guy, but someone who I don't think was brought in to overshadow Javonte Williams and was more so just to supplement the backfield that what at the time was a bit uncertain, considering they didn't know what Javonte was going to be week 1. And admittedly, I'm still hoping to see, I want a full season of Javonte. I did have him over Travis Etienne in their rookie seasons or coming out as rookies. I know Travis Etienne got his first season wiped away and Javonte's out now. So I would love to see both of those guys in a full season, just see how that matches up. And Deuce Vaughn, with the news today of Ronald Jones having that 2-game suspension. It's only 2 games, so he'll be back. But that does leave room for Deuce to slide one up in the depth chart. I think he'd be RB3 with what the depth chart says now. I don't know if he's going to pass Malik Davis or not. But, Vaughn provides a different skill set than what Malik Davis does. So I think it's just, apples and oranges there. But Deuce Vaughn, when I was thinking of shorter running backs, and I was thinking of say like a Jaquiz Rodgers, who is tremendously. I didn't realize how much. I knew he was stout, but I didn't realize how much bigger and heavier Jaquiz Rodgers was, despite I think comparable heights. But then Darren Sproles, who I also didn't realize, Darren Sproles is apparently 15 pounds heavier than this guy, which blows my mind. So Deuce Vaughn's more of a Trendon Holiday, who tremendous special teamer, but size-wise,
great track athlete.
Yeah, very much so. So I'm very much hoping that Deuce Vaughn can make an impact. If anything, maybe not as, of course, in between the tackles guy, but as more of a weapon for the Cowboys, as it never hurts to have more weapons. So any more thoughts on these running backs, Jake?
No, good here.
Right on. Well, so wide receivers. So we've got Gabe Davis and Laviska Shenault, 2 exciting wide receivers. When I look back after this, I was like, I think wide receivers, I may have not picked the most exciting group to talk about. But, so Gabe Davis. So we've got him saying that he felt like he lost a step when he suffered a high ankle sprain early in the 2022 season, and he felt like that impacted his whole year. And he said it was messing with his head, but he added he feels back to normal and he's all healthy now. And that's a Bills beat reporter said that. For Laviska Shenault, he says that he worked out harder than ever this offseason because, quote, I knew what was coming.
Yep.
And that was David Newton of ESPN covering the Panthers there. So thoughts on these 2 guys? I think they're, I think generally speaking, Gabe Davis certainly has had much more NFL success and fantasy success too. But Laviska Shenault, I think, has burnt a number of people over the years and thinking it's going to be the year, it's going to be the year. So what are your thoughts on these 2?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with Laviska. I think, he was on that KJ Hamler class. Denzel Mims also in that class. And these were some I think it was Terrace Marshall, maybe not Terrace Marshall. There was another second round wide receiver. It wasn't Andy Isabella, but there was another second round wide receiver in there that didn't pan out. That I think we had high hopes for. But Laviska coming out of Colorado was sort of that like jack of all trades player, gadget player. I think you'd want to get your hands on. And as you pointed out, he just hasn't panned out, and this is year 4 of his contract. Obviously, the Jaguars were happy to part with him, and the Panthers took him on, and he had I think he had 1 or 2, big play breaks last year with the Panthers once he was traded. But, you talk about boom or bust potential. I mean, it's 95% bust. And I wouldn't say that he's a bust. I mean, he certainly found himself a place to play in the league. But at the same time, he is not Deebo Samuel light. And when he says that quote about he knew it was coming with Frank Reich, I think there's the thought there that he's able to be Deebo Samuel light, and that's just not happening. And I understand that you've got Hubbard, and they paid Miles Sanders handsomely to come into town to play running back. I just don't foresee him being very successful in that Deebo role. He doesn't have the speed. And I don't think he has the elusiveness that Deebo does. I think he's a little bit flat-footed in that regard. Easy for me to say. As much as I hate to I guess put a damper on his opportunity there in Carolina, because I think that wide receiver 1/2 role is up for grabs with Mingo and Thielen and Chark. I'd take your pick. For the Bryce is right and Bryce Young. But for Gabe Davis, I'll make this succinct and quick. I think that, he's also got to battle guys like Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and I'm thinking there's another wide receiver I'm blanking on. Obviously, the Stephon Diggs is the clear-cut number 1. So, I mean, any given week, Gabe Davis could be the wide receiver 2 there, or he could be the wide receiver 5. And you have James Cook, who's also, like a really strong receiving back in year 3 out of Georgia. So I think I lean Gabe Davis pretty significantly, but I think that, he's just going to be, every 3rd to 4th week in fantasy. So is going to hit. So are you really going to trust that if he's back-to-back weeks and then it's 3 weeks of sub 10 points in fantasy? It's 3 for 46. I don't know. That's just my taste.
Yeah, I think Gabe Davis, over the last couple of years, he's shown us who he is, and I think people kind of saw him early and they were like, all right, it's about to be that breakout. He had his, what I now like to call his Gabe Davis playoff game where he had 50-plus fantasy points. It's like, no, but that's what he is. Like, if you look at the totality of his season, including playoffs and what have you, that is the NFL player that he is. Fantasy-wise, he's likely infuriating unless you get him understanding what he is. He's that flex play when you need him. So when you plug him in, you're hoping he gets 1 to 2 deep tutties, and you're good to go. If he doesn't maybe scorch you and have you lose a week. And with Laviska, when the talk is of Deebo, I think it's more likely it's interesting to see a guy that's that size that is the gadget guy, and I know there's only so many people you can really point to that can do those things. I think his best case scenario is he's more of a Cordarrelle Patterson, and that is more certainly within reach than a Deebo Samuel. But even Cordarrelle Patterson, he had a very interesting career that seemed to have flamed out, and then once he became a running back for a number of different teams, it really, really sparked his kind of a resurgence for his career. So hopefully Laviska is useful for the Panthers. And love that you said the Bryce is right, by the way. Really appreciate that. That was fantastic. And yeah, Gabe Davis, could be a changing of the guard with how they have their formations there with, Knox and Kincaid. Interested to see what that looks like. And, you got James Cook back there. Do they bring in Dalvin also? I don't think they would, but we'll see. But let's go ahead and talk about the most exciting position, in my opinion. And one of these guys is my guy, so I had to put him in there. So we've got Darren Waller and Jake Ferguson. So Darren Waller has been, quote, unguardable, unquote, and, quote, a headache, unquote, for the Giants defense so far in camp. I was a Giants beat writer. And Jake Ferguson has put on noticeable muscle, changed his diet, and understands fully what is expected of him for the Cowboys in 2023. And that's a beat writer for the Cowboys also. So thoughts on just both of these takes? I know Darren Waller, we've seen left and right camp stuff talking about, they had to take Waller out to have Daniel Jones actually throw to other people because Waller was just such a problem. And Jake Ferguson, of course, getting a bit of run here with Luke Schoonmaker out, I believe, on the pup. So what are your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, well said on both. I think I'll start with Jake Ferguson, and he obviously had a couple of highlight plays last year. I think he jumped over a defender or two, and I think that anytime you see those type of highlight plays, you get excited in fantasy. But I think it just leaves a lot to be desired for Jake, and I don't necessarily think it's the talent. I think it's just the lack of opportunity for catches in Dallas with Schoonmaker, who eventually will be off pup and will eventually play. By the way, he's a second-round pick and will be 25 during the year. I just didn't understand that pick by the Cowboys. And then you also have Peyton Hendershot, who flashed at times last season for the Cowboys. So I think that it's just a muddled tight end room there now. I think that the Dallas Cowboys obviously have found ways to be very productive with their tight ends over the years, and I don't think this is any different. But I think it's just going to be more of a hodgepodge and smorgasbord of who's going to be successful week to week. Darren Waller's got me excited. I think this is big news for the Giants. I think they need somebody to step up and be wide receiver one, and they have a ton of names in that wide receiver room. Darren Waller could be tight end 2 or 3 this season. I know we talk about, maybe the health hasn't been what it once was the past couple of years for Derek Carr and the Raiders. But if he's healthy, which is a big caveat, he's not over the hill by any means. He does not have a lot of tread on his tires. He's a late bloomer. He could be really, really special with Daniel Jones this upcoming fall. I'm very excited to see what that looks like, and probably going to be eyeing him is tight end 4 or 5 off the draft board. I think you also have to give credence to guys like Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, obviously before him, but he will be hot on my radar following.
Yeah, seeing him have a couple of injury-riddled seasons after a couple of back-to-back, just him being the target monster in Vegas for Derek Carr, that safety blanket. And I think the thought was, once those injuries kind of started to happen, eventually, obviously, he makes his way over to the Giants. You want him to have a resurgence, but then you also think, all right, well, what does that even look like? Like, what kind of a target share is he even going to have? And honestly, I think he probably is not going to replicate what he did in his prime of in Vegas, but that's just because the passing volume won't be there. But I think he could very easily lead pass catchers in targets this year. And they do have a weird mix of wide receivers in that room, and it's interesting because it's not like a lot of clear, like, all right, you're the clear best slot, you're the clear best outside. It's a lot of just guys, mostly a lot of slot guys, honestly. And I'm sure we could get some. I'm sure we might get some cuts, but I don't know who.
Right, you're so right, Chu. But I mean, you talk about like somebody like David Sills, deep down on the depth chart. Darius Slayton.
Yep. My boy Hodgins, though.
Isaiah Hodgins, major flashes last year. Wan'Dale Robinson is back. ACL injury last year, Oklahoma product. He's about 30 years old. He's been on the Giants forever. Sterling Shepard.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Sterling Shepard's back.
Paris Campbell's a big
Paris Campbell. Dude,
That's
I mean,
exciting.
we could just go back and forth. And we just name like 6 or 7 guys. It's a lot of names. And so I think they need somebody to stand out in the crowd. And I'm hopeful that it's Darren Waller. I never met her.
Oh, man. Jake, you are
What's happened there? Did somebody say something? I blacked out for a second.
firing on all cylinders with the names today, Jake. I love it. Well, yeah, Waller, I think pretty secure in his target share there in New York. We'll just see how big that, how many targets that is. And Jake Ferguson, yeah, ho-hum athleticism. He just seems like the guy, with he and Hendershot kind of going back and forth.
Yeah.
Last year, Schultz, of course, going to go, and he's going to go ball out in Houston. But Ferguson's a guy where he just kind of seems like I can't put my finger on what he does necessarily in terms of like he's not the overly athletic tight end. He's not the Darren Waller. He's not any of these other guys, the Njokus or whatever. But he just gets it done. He just can be there for Dak. And I know as you have CD Lamb working on the outside, you got Gallup. I think Ferguson could maybe slide in like top 15, top 12, but on the back end of it.
Okay.
And as we know though, really if you're not in the top 3 of tight end in scoring, there's a tremendous drop off after that. So you could have some names that are tight end 10 and tight end 12 in a given season where you're like, who, Juwan Johnson? Like it'll just be a who's who, and it may not help you in totality, but from a week to week streaming way, if you snag Jake Ferguson and he happens to get a tutty or two in that week, then he helped you out. But
yeah, hey, real quick, you could be pulled off of the physically unable to perform, aka the pup list, at any point in time now, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think the pup, because I think there's been some people that have gone on, off, back on.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm sure that helps with roster of like if you know that they can't do anything now, you could add them on and then bring somebody in. So, Jake, I appreciate you giving your camp stamp of approvals there, and that's right. So I can make that a transition right there. You just give a little stamp there. Love it.
There's a TikTok in there somewhere.
Oh man. Well, so last episode, I know Tyler and I got to talk a little bit of running back stuff, and I know that since then it hasn't stopped. If anything, it's picked up as we maybe get closer to finding some landing spots for some of those aging vets with Zeke and Fournette and Cook. But since the last episode, so we've got a running back Zoom call with the running backs around some of the running backs around the league, trying to figure out what's going on. Saquon, within a week after that Zoom call, gets a shade over the tag. Only with incentives.
Yeah.
The incentives get him, I think, $1 million over, 900,000 over, I want to say.
And I think there's like a playoff berth that he has to get to in there too.
Stats, it's like rushing yards plus playoff berth, rushing touchdowns plus playoff berth, and there's like a third thing.
Sure.
So it's all like tied. So like I think if they don't make the playoffs, I don't think he gets any of it. I'm pretty sure. But
understood.
We got that. We've got Melvin Gordon signing with the Ravens. Jonathan Taylor requesting a trade from Jim Irsay. Maybe they're threatening to put him on the non-football injury list, which means he possibly wouldn't get paid this year, but then it wouldn't mess up with his contracts. Then it would basically just put it on pause until 2024. A whole lot of stuff. So with what you're seeing now, we have a couple of those the vets that we've talked about haven't signed yet. How do you attack the running back position at this point, if that's a need for you on your fantasy team?
I mean, it's cliche to say, but it's the wild, wild west out there right now, man. I mean, you can't win. I mean, even Breece Hall, somebody who was awesome last year, you have as a rookie, you have question mark, and arguably would have been the running for rookie of the year, I think, with his teammate Garrett Wilson. You don't know how he's going to bounce back from the torn ACL. You think Kenneth Walker, okay, he was really strong last year as a rookie, and then they bring in another second rounder in Zach Charbonnet. I mean, then you look at somebody that's in that second or third tier in Khalil Herbert, and you say, okay, well, maybe it's Khalil's time to shine. He's not great in pass protection. They bring in a fourth rounder in Roschon Johnson, who was awesome, former quarterback at Texas, and backed up the amazing Bijan Robinson. If you backed up Bijan, how many places could he have started in college, let alone now the NFL? So, I mean, it's a really, really interesting time for the running back position in the NFL. I do believe that the famous last words that Jonathan Taylor will figure this out with Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay kind of, for lack of a better term, just foams at the mouth sometimes and really makes me want to scratch my head as a person and as a fantasy football player. But I think in terms of fantasy and running backs, you just try to take what you think I like to say a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. So how much of a sure thing can you get your hands on? Christian McCaffrey's missed some games of late, but the offensive system that he is in. So I would probably, try to – I'm not a handcuff person, but I think this year I'm probably going to do some of that with Christian McCaffrey. And I know Elijah Mitchell's shown some injury concerns as well this past couple of years. But I'm probably going to, get a hold of him, get a hold of Khalil Herbert, and also Roschon Johnson. I'm going to be on J.K. Dobbins. I'm a believer there, but I'm also going to have my hands on Gus Edwards, for example. And so I think that's the only way that I can sort of assure myself that I'm feeling better about the running back position. I think it's a handcuff strategy. I think it's, Javonte Williams, obviously I'm a believer, but the injuries, you just don't know. And Tony Pollard, my goodness, Tony broke his tibia last year in the playoffs. That was ugly. Josh Jacobs still not reporting to camp. There are just so many question marks where there are so few sure things right now at the running back position, more so than I think I can ever remember.
Yeah, thinking about, I feel like in the last couple of years, people touting in like redraft the zero running back strategy of saying, "Oh, I'm when it makes sense, I'll do this, so then I can get max value elsewhere. I can hope I hit on some of these other running backs, but worst case, I'll figure it out." I really hope that at least for my sake, 'cause I'm being a little selfish here, I hope that people are still holding on to that strategy because I feel like for a lot of these question marks, because it's those guys that are in the top 10, top 12, maybe top 15, that there's so many question marks, whether it be injury, holdout, that sort of thing. If, as a, say in redraft, if you're able to take advantage of some of these guys that fall because, yeah, Josh Jacobs hasn't reported yet, so he slips down half a round maybe than what you think he should be valued at. Yeah. Christian McCaffrey, of course, like you mentioned with injury, Breece Hall, that kind of thing. If you're able to snag up some of these guys sooner than you thought, even multiple, the thought used to be, if I get my one bell cow guy, because there's not only so many at this point, then that'd be great. Right. I mean, heck, if you're able to get a couple and then, do what you can at wide receiver and tight end and that sort of thing. Like you said, though, it is a very unbelievable landscape when it comes to just how uncertain the entire running back market is at this point. When we're pumping up guys like Samaje Perine in the offseason and how tremendous, how impactful that can be, just with what's in front of him.
Yeah, there's a lot of unrest at the position. If I was doing a startup dynasty draft, I think I would be focusing heavily on the wide receivers and if it's super flex, the quarterbacks, and figure it out from there. I'm not a believer in zero RB. That's why I didn't suggest it. Yep. But I think if there was ever a time to consider it, it could be now.
Yep. And talking about a couple of those veteran running backs that still have yet to sign anywhere, but so we've got Zeke, say he was visiting the Patriots. We've got Dalvin Cook, he visited the Jets. And then Fournette, I'm not sure. I think he had visited the Patriots a few weeks back, but I'm not sure of his most recent happenings, comings, and goings. So what are your thoughts on, do you have any either guesses, say, where these guys are going to sign? The thought of it's, they'll just wait till, a couple weeks into the season, they stay fresh, they just pop on a team where they think is the most confident, ring chaser, that sort of thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think running back is that one skill position where you can step in and make an impact relatively quickly. Easy for me to say. I think Leonard Fournette, I could see him signing in New England if I had just a pie in the sky view of where it would make sense for him to go. I would like him there. I think he can make an impact as a pass catcher. Good compliment to Ramondre Stevenson. Kareem Hunt, I think, might actually be done. I've not heard any momentum around his name this year. The Browns had feared that he lost a step after this past season. It's a shame, but I think he could be on the outs in terms of finding a roster spot or finding a home this fall. Zeke, I know you said he mentioned, seeing the Patriots. I still have this harmonious belief that maybe there's a home for him in Dallas. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Maybe with Rojo's 2-game suspension. There's a shot, but it's also weird just to think about him in any other uniform besides Dallas. Think he could be a compliment in Cincinnati, actually behind Joe Mixon. I think they have similar styles, but I think he could benefit them being there. And then in terms of Dalvin, I think he's obviously spent some time. There's been a lot of rumors about him being with the Jets. What would that mean for Breece Hall? Don't know. And Israel Abanikanda. Bam Knight, Michael Carter. Like, what would it mean for those guys? Wouldn't think that they'd all make the roster. And Dalvin had an interesting tweet the other day where he tweeted one of his touchdown runs last year against the Dolphins. And I thought I was wondering if was there some sort of subliminal messaging where he was saying that, okay, like, I'm going to be scoring again against the Dolphins this year. And obviously there was a lot of rumors in the offseason that he could be going to Miami. So I'm very anxious to see where he ends up. It seems like if there's going to be anybody that signs and makes a lucrative impact, it's him. But I also heard some news, not to completely do a 180 here, but I also heard some news that there were potentially some legal challenges for him in terms of like a previous domestic violence dispute. And he was offering, I mean, I'm just throwing out this reckless, defamations here. But, there was an allegation that he was trying to throw some hush money to a former girlfriend for like a domestic violence dispute. It was reported by CBS a couple of days ago. So I thought to myself, maybe that's why he hasn't signed, but I don't know, man. The way the running back market is going right now, it doesn't seem like I would have thought they would have gotten a home, but now because of the way the situation, lies with even Jonathan Taylor, when Jim Irsay is saying the show must go on, I'm thinking, man, maybe the show goes on without all of these guys. Dalvin's going to find a home, but the other guys, maybe not.
Yeah, and I think with Fournette, I know he was able to get a ring or so in Tampa. I don't know if that changes his mindset of knowing, like, hey, I'm comfortable. I'll wait. I want to see what it looks like, because where I'm going, I want to make pretty damn sure that where I'm going to get a ring. I'm at a minimum making a good playoff run. Yeah. Zeke, it is so weird. To even just try and think of, like, what other jersey would he be in? Where does it make sense? Yeah. I think he's got enough left in the tank to where, not that he would necessarily be like the guy, say, if he's behind Joe Mixon, but that'd be a heck of a 1-2 punch in Cincy. And I think that would be tremendous. We always talk about what a great wide receiving core they have, to help lift up Joe Burrow as if he needs any lifting up. But then if you're going to have, Mixon and Zeke in the back, that's a punishing backfield. So that could be something tremendous to help them with a big playoff push. And I do sincerely hope that I hope they all do sign before week 1. I do fear that, maybe one or two of them are just sincerely just going to wait it out. And they're vets. They'll stay in good enough shape. They know, like you said, I think compared to any other position, like with Christian McCaffrey, which again, I know he's an animal, but when he was traded to San Fran, he played that week, not a full workload, but I think I'd heard an interview and just they were talking about how crazy it was. Like, man, like days later, you go to San Fran and you play that week. How did you even do that? And you talked about, they did scale it back a bit for him, but it's like, as a running back, it's just, understand kind of the scheme and where you need to go and just do it. So, yeah, hopefully we can get some resolution there. Well, the final fantasy question before you get to have your shout out. So the FF Expo coming up next Friday. Very excited to be going there with you and Tyler. So what are you most looking forward to, either seeing or going to or what have you next Friday?
Yeah, I can make this short and sweet, Chew. It's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Being a connoisseur of football since I can remember, I cannot wait to see what the Pro Football Hall of Fame has to offer. And personally, I have a friend who works there, which I think it's going to give me a little more insight into what's there, how it operates, what's next for the Hall of Fame. But I think I'm just going to have like one of those like giddy little boy moments that I'm very excited for and really can't wait to see. I mean, it's sort of the icing on the cake to the expo, but I know that's separate from fantasy football. But I mean, I don't know the next time I'm going to be in Canton, Ohio, so I can't wait to take advantage of that opportunity to its fullest.
Yeah, I think when I think of all the places, like each of the places like that, like the Cooperstown for baseball, that to be able to go to, I think thinking of the NFL Hall of Fame and being able to go to Canton, I think is incredible. It's great that the FF Expo even happens, let alone the fact that it conveniently happens in Canton, which is just incredibly cool. It just makes perfect sense, and excited to be there in a few short days. I can't remember how many days, but yeah, next Friday. Looking forward to it.
7 to 10 business days.
That's right. Yeah. Well, to expedite this episode here, Jake, you get the final word, a shout out, a quote, a cheers, whatever you got. Football
is back, baby. Tomorrow we are turning. Forgive me, Chio. I'm sorry if I'm dating the podcast. Feel free to edit this out. But we're on the precipice of August, my friend, and we're gonna have football. We've got the Hall of Fame game coming up in a couple of days. Hard not to get pumped up about that, So I mean, I think we are in football season until further notice in February of 2024, and that is really special. It's been a long time coming. There's still a ton to sort out in upcoming training camps and preseason games over the next month, but football is back, baby.
I love to hear it, and I never figured that I would say I'm excited to see some Browns and Jets football, but let's make it happen. All right, good to see you, buddy. Looking forward to catching up.
Likewise, brother.